The other reason we're here tonight is because the Honorable Mark Keough, District 15 House Representative, is here to tell us about the 84th session and how his freshman year went. Mark?
First time I got a letter in the mail and it said the Honorable Mark Keough. I had talked to Betty Anderson earlier that day, and I called her back, and I said, Betty, I said, man, I just got a letter that said the Honorable Mark Keough. She said, man, don't let it go to your head. I'm a precinct chair, and I get the Honorable Betty Anderson. So she kind of set me straight right at the very beginning. First of all, I want to tell you that it is truly an honor to be here tonight and to be able to share with you what took place in the 84th session and to answer questions that you may have on a plethora of subjects, I'm sure. I also want to acknowledge that, I believe that in these opportunities that God brings people into your life to help you, and He certainly brought Jason Millsap and Kurt Jones over here. Stand up so everybody can see who you are, who helped me tremendously through the whole process. And knowing where things were, when things were going to be done. This is also Lucille Landis, who is my campaign finance, stand up Lucille so everybody can see who you are, my campaign finance person, and who keeps me out of trouble in the ethics issues. We appreciate that. Mark, this won't work. Write me a personal check. Okay. And of course my bride Kim, who's my biggest fan, and who has, everybody see how beautiful you are. Like many of you, I'm married way over my head, and I'm not in denial about that. But Kim has been a great source of help and encouragement for me. I have to tell you that going into this for the first time, that there is a learning curve that I thought we were able to anticipate. But the fact of the matter is you just can't anticipate it. Since I had no one running against me in the fall, I had the summer to be able to visit, talk to people, go around the community, find out what was important, go over to the House of Representatives, go to the Capitol, walk through it, and then all of a sudden things start happening. It's coming so fast, and I have to tell you that that there is a learning curve in it. And one of the things that I've learned is that we start in a session, you start, you plan, you work on something, and you do things incrementally. Hopefully you'll be able to revisit those things in the future. And there are a number of those things that I'll talk about tonight. First of all, concerning the legislative process, the Texas legislature meets for regular session on the second Tuesday in January of each odd-numbered year and goes to the end of May per the Constitution. It's comprised of two chambers, the House of Representatives and the Senate. It's 31 members in the Senate. The House has 150, and both your bills must pass both houses before they can be signed by the governor. This year, there were presented 6,300 plus bills, 6,300 plus bills, potential laws. I've talked to a number of people as I was speaking over the period of time I was doing this. I said this ought to be one of the scariest times for the people of Texas, that they turn the legislature loose for a period from January 13th to the end of May, where they create laws, they rid us of laws, they figure out ways to either raise your taxes or lower your taxes, and you all ought to be praying for us every single day, because you just can't tell what might come up on any given day, especially given all the different values that are going on there. More than 1,300 bills and joint resolutions were passed during this time, and I say joint resolutions, both the House and the Senate. And I'm going to this evening, I want to just go over just a quick cursory notations on some of the things that I believe were important that were done, where my participation was in those, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to blow through this stuff pretty quick, and you'll maybe want to write some things down as you hear it. Whatever I'm unable to answer, I will find for you, and I will come back and I will give it to you, because obviously I can't do it all and I can't answer it all. But I've got a pretty good feel for what took place. Concerning our Second Amendment rights, House Bill 910, which I had the privilege, the honor of co-authoring, allows someone with a concealed handgun license holders to openly carry handguns. Individuals are still required to have CHL to openly carry. Doesn't prevent or restrict private businesses from prohibiting licensed carriers from entering and having, from prohibiting them carrying a handgun on their premises. I was also the first to co-author Bill 195, which was the constitutional open carry, which unfortunately did not see the light of day. And there was some issue about some of the things that were added on, then taken off in House Bill 910. But what we have to do is look at it from an incremental standpoint. This is the first time since Reconstruction in the state of Texas, since the late 1800s, that we could carry a gun openly in the state of Texas, handgun. Also in the Second Amendment, I was able to co-author Senate Bill 11, authorizing a concealed handgun license, CHL holder to carry a concealed handgun while on a college campus. To be eligible for this, they must pass state and federal background checks as a CHL holder, pass the education course and shooting proficiency test. They also must be 21 years of age. I have to be honest with you, when I first heard about this a few years ago, I'm thinking to myself, I remember when I was in college and some of the things that I did in college. How about you? It's okay to smile. And I think about some of that and I go, man, we really want young people carrying these guns. Do you know, go to the Department of Public Safety website, look up CHL. Do you know that the Department of Public Safety believes that people who are concealed handgun carriers are the most law-abiding citizens in Texas? It's amazing. If you look at, and they have all the statistics, don't have time to go through it, but you really should check that out. And so I think this is a great move. It still allows for them to have gun-free zones and some other things in it, but it is a great move. Concerning the budget, 1 year it's done by the House. The next session, the last Senate, was done by the Senate, approved by the House. This is really, even though I know there is some disagreement on some of the things that are in this, it's the most conservative budget that we've had in many sessions. The budget was $209.4 billion budget, representing growth of 3.6%, which is less than 2% per year. Stays well below the constitutional spending cap, leaves more than $11 billion in the state's rainy day fund, and it's tied to a percentage of the overall budget, which is the rainy day fund. And it's the first time it's been untapped in many, many years as we go into the next biennium. Also provides additional funding for education, border security, transportation, child protection. This was my first real entry into the realm of big bills. You're talking about a bill that's this thick. I also co-authored a bill, the first bill that had to do with Sunset Committee, which was a 2,247-page bill. Imagine 4 reams of paper plus 4.5 reams of paper stacked this high. It's remarkable, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But concerning the budget, I have to tell you, we got on the floor at 10 o'clock, and at 6:20 the following day, I went home. It was amazing. Total was over 20 hours at the House of Representatives at one time. There were 354 amendments to this bill that had to be discussed. This information was coming so fast. Here's what else I found. If you go into the session, there have been those individuals who have been meeting ahead of the session based upon the biennium's committees and what committees they were assigned to. So they're working on the various processes in virtually every committee, and all of a sudden they're showing up with these bills, and you're sitting there and you're trying to get caught up on this, and you're scratching your head and you're wondering what's going on. But we had a great time. We had accurate information, and I believe that overall this is compared to especially the previous budget, was far superior. Yet there are some areas I believe that we still could work on. 36.8% is Health and Human Services. I was on the Health and Human Services Committee. I was on Human Services, and that was an awesome experience. We'll talk about that as well. Education is 37.4. Business and Economic Development is 13.2. Public Safety and Criminal Justice, 5.9%. If you could look at a pie chart, that was kind of how you see these things. But the amount of money that's spent between education and health and human services is staggering. It's amazing. Budget transparency, House Bill 6, House Bill 7, to reduce some of the what you may call the accounting gimmicks, if you will, in the state budget. More of the fees that the state collects will be used for their intended purposes, while the fees will be eliminated. House Bill 1 ends diversions of the gas tax, for instance, and ensures that all of the money in the state highway fund will be used for transportation. So we created a gas tax that had monies to be used for transportation, 10 cents, and it had 5 cents to be used for education. That was the purpose in creating the tax. So they've never deviated from the 5%, but they have deviated from the 10 cents, and so they have gone back to ensuring that all of that money goes to the state highway fund. Also in the budget, public education, House Bill 1 pays for an increase in enrollment of roughly 80,000 students per year in the state's public school system, fully funds the enrollment growth as we're expecting 80,000 students per year, and then adds an additional $1.5 billion in public education funding. Transportation uses all of the money in the state highway fund for transportation instead of using some of the dollars, as we mentioned, for other programs. Border security, $840 million for border security. We'll talk about that in a moment, but it allows for hiring more officers and some other things. Protecting our children, funding of extremely underfunded Child Protective Services. That's in my committee. Under that, I worked with Child Protective Services in a bill and ultimately an amendment that did pass, having to do with homeschoolers and foster care. In terms of tax relief, we started out, as many of you know, we started out in the House of Representatives, and we presented, I think it was 0.3 of a cent. It was from 6.25 to 5.9 cents, with a decrease in the retail sales tax, and then also making some adjustments in the franchise tax. I wrote a bill. I presented it, and it was a bill that was fairly aggressive, but could have been done. I chose to go with another, more experienced legislator, figuring that we will have the opportunity to move on that bill to do it all. They weren't going to accept it. It wasn't going to be germane to what they were doing. And so we ended up passing the franchise tax, where it's reduced by 25%. So they'll do that over the next few bienniums. We'll try again next time, now that we know how this works and what needs to be done. I believe we had the resources to do it. One of the issues that came up was that they were concerned that they would give property tax relief, but that they weren't sure what gas prices were. They weren't going to be able to project where that was. And so that was what they said was the reason why they wanted to leave it there. But it still is a tax break. I voted any time I could for any kind of tax break, any kind. Whether it was a tax break for what quote unquote what my Democrat colleagues called taxes for the rich, whether it was taxes for those who were financially challenged, whatever the case may be, I always voted to decrease taxes. So what we ended up in Senate Bill 1, of which I co-sponsored, it went to the Senate, had some changes, and this year it came back over and came back over to the House. Increased the homestead exemption for school property tax from $15,000 to $25,000 beginning in 2015 tax year, effectively returning $1.24 billion to Texas. Also, in the franchise tax, we repealed the franchise tax will go through 2020, but the school district tax, the homestead exemption will go through 2020. But in the franchise tax, this is interesting. That in itself relieves or gives up another $3+ billion, and just in the 25%. Before the session, having talked with our previous comptroller, Susan Combs, she said that we could eliminate it. It would increase $18 billion by completely eliminating the franchise tax, and the amount of jobs we would create would be staggering. We got a feel for it. It didn't happen. So like I mentioned, that's what we're going to do. We're going to work on that. I also offered an amendment to SB 1. When SB 1 came back over, I offered an amendment. They told me it was not germane, but I had a chance to speak on the floor on it, in which I offered an amendment where they would reduce the franchise, or not the franchise, but the school district, or the homestead, not the homestead exemption, but the help me, Jason.
Appraisal cap.
Appraisal cap. The appraisal cap, which is now constitutionally at 10%, to reduce it to 5%. They said it was not germane. They let me speak on the floor. I talked about appraisal reform. We can lower the rate all we want, but if our appraisals continue to rise, you know what happens. We keep writing a bigger check. The difficult part here is the school districts are depending upon these resources. So you have mixed emotions on the part of the school districts who want the resources from the appraisal. And so this is something that we're going to work very, very hard on, because we must have appraisal reform if we're going to have any meaningful tax reduction in terms of our property. You know, even with this 15 to 25,000, you won't see that in a few years. And so it's very difficult, but it is something, and thank God for something, we were able to accomplish that. House Bill 32 reduces the rate of the franchise tax, remember that? And I said it was 2.6 billion tax cut in the upcoming biennium. The Senate Bill 1760, just briefly, offers an increase in transparency to promote efficiency in the property tax system, brings truth in taxation. And then we move to border security. I had a chance to co-author House Bill 11. House Bill 11 bolsters the ranks of the Department of Public Safety officers on the border, increases their numbers by 250, adding over $800 million in monies to their coffers to be able to do that. It establishes an intelligence center on the border to analyze crime data and serve as a real-time, around-the-clock intelligence hub for state and local law enforcement. They have something similar to that right now. I have been to the border. I went to their command center. I flew on the helicopters. I rode on the boats on the water. The difficulty that we have there is that we do not have cooperation of the government, the U.S. government, to help us in this. When they go on the water and there's any type of activity on the part of the guys from Mexico or coming across from Central America, if there's any type of confrontation, they're under rules to not engage and they take off. We don't have those same rules. And I know this. I talked to Colonel McCraw. I was on the boat. I wore the Kevlar vests and I even drove the boat. It was pretty exciting. And up and down the Rio Grande. And when they shoot at us, we shoot back. So we feel that we are able to maintain some control by adding more people to the border. Wherever we move people to a particular section on the border, it stops. But then it's like trying to hold mud in your hand and squeeze it. It just comes out somewhere else. So this will help us along the way. It also creates a plan to establish southbound checkpoints on international bridges and that go into Mexico, and international checkpoints to search for money that's being laundered, contraband, search for weapons. It's not so much, it still is an issue with them cartels bringing things across the border, but now it's what's going from here into Mexico, and much of that has to do with arms smuggling or with bulk cash. We also implemented Senate Bill 374, requiring state agencies and public universities to use the E-Verify system to protect against the hiring of those who are in the country illegally. And I have to tell you, I think that is great. It is mind-boggling almost to think that we do that and then we turn around and give in-state tuition to students who are here illegally. And from my perspective, House Bill 360, I was very much, we wrote this bill, we put this bill forth, and through a number of circumstances, it was amazing. We were in over 90 newspapers around the country. We were on Telemundo, Austin, Houston, Fox News. And what I have come to find out is that if you want to get something done, you need to do it quietly, and you need to do it stealthily, and you need to not be running around telling people how great you are. Because as soon as we came out with that bill, and there was a big splash about it, man, we were met by everybody and their brother, every lobbyist, every group that didn't want this to take place. I walked out of the House of Representatives, and there were 3 young people, 2 girls and a guy. They were videoing me as they wanted to know why I didn't want them to continue with their education here in the United States. It was amazing. And they can't seem to grasp this idea of the concept of what is fair, of what is just, of what is virtuous. To leave a student who has watched his entire life, who's been out of this state, who wants to come here and wants to go to school, and either can't get in because there are those entitled groups that are able to go there regardless of their grades, or they can't get in because they can't afford it. But yet we turn around and we allow an individual who, yes, to be sure, has come up through the education system, which we freely give education to these children. And then they automatically get to go to University of Texas for a savings of anywhere from $12,000, $13,000, $14,000. And then anybody who comes who is a U.S. citizen who wants to do that has to pay full pop in order to come from out of state, if indeed they get accepted. And yet we have an E-Verify system to protect us against the hiring of those who are in the country illegally. House Bill 12, Border Prosecution Unit, which will facilitate cooperation among prosecutors. It will give us more people to prosecute on the border. Transportation, House Bill 20, provides necessary oversight, transparency, and accountability to ensure the DOT maximizes the effectiveness of the resources. So there are some things, and again, we could be here all night long talking about this stuff. I'm just giving you some highlights because I want to get to your questions. Then in public education, here's some things that we did. In public education, House Bill 2804. Did you know that currently in our state, that schools are measured by whether or not they're exceptional, satisfactory, or needs improvement? And if a district, which has a number of schools in it, is satisfactory, then automatically all the schools in the district automatically are satisfactory. We implemented an A to F process that is specific to campuses. Right now in Montgomery County, we are in a satisfactory to exceptional position, but there is an elementary school that needs tremendous improvement. Right now, today. And because of the overall score of CISD, that school gets the same score as CISD, but it's in deep trouble. Parents are unaware of this. This A to F system will no longer allow that to take place. It'll be an A to F system by district, and also an A to F specifically to each campus. Senate Bill 313, which was a bill that, thank the Lord, that was vetoed. I had the chance last summer with the Texas Board of Education under their chairperson, Barbara Keough, who I applied to her and was able to go, and I read textbooks for a week last year in social studies and U.S. history. And in doing that, House Bill 313 challenged two things. It challenged what had previously been done, all the work that started back in 2011, had been authorized into the 12 to 13 biennium, and then having been authorized to do it, then in 2014, having read the book's being implemented in 2015, House Bill 313 would give them the opportunity to shut that deal down. It also, House Bill 313 gave, which by the way would be an introduction to elements of Common Core. It also said that the 100% of the dollars that public school systems get, where they are to be used for curriculum, that now they couldn't use all 100% of that, they could only use 75%, and 25% of that would be to be used for IT type things. Well, we know that the teacher curriculums and things that come to the teachers through Common Core and some other things have been over the internet, where they get their information, they ignore the textbook. We went through this all last year. So I went and I offered two amendments. I couldn't get that one handled. Jimmy Don Aycock said, I will fight for this one, but I will give you your amendment, where I said that all the work that had been done previously in the social studies had to remain. And sure enough, when the bill first went through, before we went to the third reading, there was only 19 of us that voted against this bill. I had a chance to go and to represent the interest of Montgomery County, all of you, and I also was able to give a signed document that had been signed by a number of organizations. Kathy Adams, her group, and Betty's group, Stand Up Betty's, everybody can see, everybody knows Betty's, wave your hand, everybody can see. Eagle Forum, and her group had signed off on this, and a number of conservative groups had signed off, and conservative education groups as well, 8 or 9 in total, and I had to go get permission to be able to distribute that on the floor. The vote was coming in the next hour and a half. And so I went to Charlie Guerin, who was in charge of this, and I mentioned, he said, man, he said, looked at it and read it, he goes, man, where did you get this? And I said, well, I got it from this individual. And he said, man, I can't stand that guy. And I said, well, Charlie, think about the kids. We need to do this for the kids. I did the work, I was there, I've studied this, and we've got to get this on the floor, and it's only fair. He goes, okay, you do it, you sign off on it. So sure enough, I did. We distributed that, signed off on 150 of them, distributed to everybody on the floor. Then, when Jimmy Don Aycock got up there, he was waiting. He got up, he stood up there. He even introduced me. It was hilarious. I couldn't believe it. He said, I believe Mark Keough has got some questions and wants to offer an amendment. And I began to ask him, you could go to the archives and ask him, what was the issue? Why are you trying to push this through? What is so important about this? And tried to pull things out. We ran out of time. It turned out, we increased it from 86 to 50 vote, from 125 to 19. But thank God it went to the Senate. Even though it passed, it was vetoed by our governor. Because of all of your efforts, I got many of your emails, and he vetoed the bill. So we made it through another session. What is there is going to stay. In terms of public education, there was a really interesting bill that I want to address with you. Because I know that in this particular bill, when I voted for this bill, that it made some of you very uncomfortable with my commitment to my conservative values. I think that's fair. It has to do with the pre-kindergarten situation. Because House Bill 4 was what the governor had said in his inaugural address, House Bill 4, and in pre-kindergarten was an issue that was high priority, and he had 5 high priority items. This was one of them. And so we met, the Republican caucus met, the conservative Republican coalition group met, and as I read the bill and I thought about what we were going to spend either way, how in the world can this bill put some accountability into the money that was going to be spent? So I read the bill. I studied the bill. I studied the amendments to the bill. And I have to tell you, I am not in favor of pre-kindergarten. I want you to hear me on this. I'm not a pre-kindergarten guy. I wish that everybody could keep their kids at home. Everybody could educate their kids, like I was able to do with my 4 children in their early formative years. But as I thought about that, and as I thought what this bill was about, this is what came to my mind. I can vote against this bill and allow almost $2.9 billion over the next biennium be spent again with zero accountability for that money. No accountability whatsoever. That money goes out to schools. They give it to the school. It goes to them. If they want to spend it on a building, if they want to spend it on curriculum, if they want to spend it on teacher stuff, they can spend it on whatever they want. This bill would bring accountability to that. And I came up with a number of reasons that I want to share with you today, while I am not in favor of pre-K, why I felt in my heart of hearts, even though I knew I was going to take some heat for it, why this was the most conservative thing that I could do. And here's why. First, unlike the amount of money that was going to go out, it provided accountability for funds. We want to know that this money goes there, and we want you to show us. Secondly, assessment of student success. There's no assessment at all. We want something that is measurable to be able to look at how they've done. It requires teacher certification. I talked to Jeff Leach. Representative Jeff Leach put an amendment in the bill concerning teacher certification, that certification could not be in any way connected to any Common Core curriculum. That was put in the bill that is now in law right now. It brings cooperation, and also it's not just sending them off somewhere. If they've been there for 8 years, there's some authorizations. There's a number of different ways that a teacher can be certified in this. It brings cooperation between private and public school institutions. Some people think there is no connection between the private and public school. Well, in our school district that I'm in the Woodlands, this pre-kindergarten program is not even there. It does not apply, because this is a program that is designed for children who are language deficient, children who are intellectually challenged, or children who are in a situation where it is a low-income area. And this bill only applies to those schools that already have this in place. Now, those schools that already have it in place, there's numbers of them, in order to get it done, would have to build additional facilities at additional cost to the taxpayers. So they came up with an idea that if they could cooperate with private institutions, for the first time in the history of education in the state of Texas, these private institutions could let them use their facilities, or could even take over the program according to how they felt, as long as they would pass the qualifications of the public school. It required parental involvement. Now, you and I both know that we all want parental involvement. And the fact of the matter is, how do you enforce that? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure. What does that mean, parental involvement, in these underprivileged areas where these people are working, and their kids are by themselves? I don't know what that means. All I know is, at present, there is no parental accountability. It requires best practices implementation. The commissioner of that area looks at all the schools in his area, picks best practices, and is required to implement those, so it has a form of Kaizen, or continuous improvement, in it that is to be presented to the legislature. It has a sunset clause in it. If it doesn't work, we look at this, and I believe it's in 2025, they're giving it 10 years to work, 5 bienniums, a sunset clause that if this thing isn't working, it's history. And third and last, it eliminates Common Core curriculum standards. Now, I know you've got some questions about this, so hang on to them, because we're going to talk about it in a second. I'll explain to you as I continue to explain my position on that. Again, I was not in favor of voting in favor of expanding pre-K. It does not expand pre-K. It does add some monies to it. The Senate put a cap on it so that it could only add so much. One of the arguments that I experienced when I was supporting this on the floor was the unintended consequences. People, listen to me. You need to hear me on this. There are unintended consequences with every decision you make in your life. We now are using the phrase unintended consequences because we are afraid to move forward on decisions. What are the unintended consequences? And we know there are unintended consequences in a lot of things. My friend Larry Cullen, when they came out with the Patriot Act, I said, man, I'm so glad we have the Patriot Act right after 9/11. He says, man, Mark, we're going to be sorry. Because what's going to happen is Patriot Act may be good now, but in the hands of the wrong people, it's a problem. And look what we've just experienced with the NSA. Listening to everybody under the Patriot Act. So there are unintended consequences. Well, my question to the person who argued with me on the floor, unintended consequences, at least I have something I can measure now along the way. What are the unintended consequences of $2.9 billion of taxpayer money going out, being spent however any particular administrator wants to spend it? I thought, as I looked at that, I thought, man, this is the most conservative thing I could do. And some people that I thought were on board, and organizations that argued with me about this, thought we had them on board, ended up turning at the end, but nonetheless, it did pass and it's in place. Public Safety, House Bill 10, I co-authored this, creates a Child Sex Traffic Prevention Unit. Senate Bill 344 strengthens law enforcement's ability to investigate and prosecute persons who solicit minors. House Bill 2291 increases the punishment for repeat offenders of possession. Pro-life passage. I was so happy to be able to co-author the pro-life bills that were on the floor. The House passed some very critical pro-life legislation, while other strong pro-life legislation, I have to tell you, was slow-walked to death. It never even made it because of timing. And that's a whole other issue, but I will talk about that in a moment. House Bill 3994. I started out as a joint author and worked on this bill with the author, and there was 5 slots for anybody who wanted to help on this. There was some individual who we felt could probably do a better job at getting this deal done, and so I allowed him to have the joint position on this bill. But I was keenly interested in this bill because it seeks to improve the protection of minors by addressing reforms in the judicial bypass system. Allows the judge to ask more substantial and relevant and considerate questions of the minor. Extends the date and time at which a court is required to rule on an application, and it changes the venue requirement for the judicial bypass court hearings. Also in pro-life, also proud to co-author this, reforms the statute governing the end-of-life care to ensure that vulnerable patients are not denied the basic human care of food, water, and pain management. I had a friend who was in hospice, a very dear friend of mine. He was my assistant manager at Northside Lexus, and he had lymphoma. And he was slowly dying. Betty, he was at your church, John Bay. And he was at your church. They put him into hospice. And once they put him into hospice, he knew he was going to die. He was denied water, and he was denied food. And he was on medication, and he was dying. And it facilitated him moving quickly. And everybody just went along with it. And I thought, something is just not right about this. A bill has been passed. The current Texas Advance Directive Act lacks clarity given the complexity of end-of-life care. House Bill 3074, and this was the one that I co-authored. And I also co-authored 3994, but this was the joint author co-author. Issue 1 was 3074. House Bill 3074 will improve patient care by ensuring that food and water are provided unless it hastens the patient's death. If you give it to them and it makes them die quicker, don't give it to them. Causes major medical problems, causing pain that cannot be relieved, or is ineffective, conflicts with the patient's documented wishes. And because it's so convoluted now, they will literally allow a person to go to their grave by not feeding them or giving them more in hospice. Some other conservative victories. House Bill 1690 removed public corruption cases from Travis County's Public Integrity Unit, effectively end the most liberal county's monopoly on investigating and prosecuting public officials. If they are in trouble and they're being investigated, they will go back to their own county to be prosecuted. For me, if I do something wrong and it happens while I'm in the House of Representatives, then I come back here and you all indict me and try me. I'm not planning on that taking place. Senate Joint Resolution 22, constitutionally securing Texans' right to hunt, fish, and harvest wildlife. As the EPA is having more and more control, we want to make sure we guarantee that. And also the Pastor Protection Bill reaffirms that pastors and churches may be required to participate in any part of a marriage celebration of a marriage if it would violate sincerely held religious belief. As a pastor of a local church, this is important to me. Unfortunately, we would have to test this in the light of recent legislation, as you know. And which brings up the whole issue of nullification, such words as people are talking about on my Facebook of secession and all these various things that continue to come up. Nonetheless, I was able to co-author that, and it's in place now. Offered an amendment to Senate Bill 206. This was really interesting. In the state of Texas, let me take one step back. We have a legislator that presented to Human Services, under Child Protective Services, a bill to allow foster children to go into homes where they're being homeschooled, and allow the foster children who are wards of the state to be homeschooled by the parents. So he went and he wrote this bill, but he, per his testimony, decided that none of his things were going to get done this session, and so he left it there. The chairman of the committee read the bill and liked the bill, invited him to make a session with us and to come and to talk to us about this bill. So I began to listen to the bill and as it was presented, because in the state of Texas there are 16,000 foster kids, 16,000, and there are 150,000 homeschool families. And so what a great way to get kids out of an institution, even the possibility of adoption, and to get them into a nurturing, loving family that wants to help these kids. Well, as it turned out, the people from CPS were there, and we asked the question, how many of these have you turned down since it started, since people have been homeschooling? We've only turned down one. And I thought, isn't that interesting? And somebody else asked the question. And she went and sat down, and I started thinking about this, and then while I was there, I pulled my iPad out, and I read the education code, and I read the family code. Long story short, there was a disconnect between these two codes, and there was something that was missing. And I turned back to the lady who had been up there, and I asked her to please come back up to the microphone while I was up on the dais, and to ask her how many, and I figured if she knows only one's been turned down, surely she knows how many have been accepted. So sure enough, I asked her, and she said that they have accepted 47 out of 48 applications. And I thought, well, how can this be if there's nothing in statute? I looked up the family code, the education code. I turned and looked over at the speaker, who was the chairman, who was at the head as the speaker of the committee. And I told him, I said, Chairman Raymond, I said, there's a disconnect here on this bill. This is a good bill. There's between these two phrases, we need to come up with some documentation and find out what is the standard here and be able to implement this and turn it into law. He turned to me and he said, you are now the subcommittee chairman for foster care. I said, really? And he said, yes, and it will be a committee of one. And I said, put me in, Coach. And then the next day he came to me and he said, I want you to pick a Democrat and Republican and fix this. Well, that night I went back, in my apartment until the wee hours, and I just studied this. Long story short, I thought, why don't I just Google Child Protective Services? And after I found some other bills and some things that other people had done, was looking at blogs and had studied the code, and I thought, why don't I just Google up foster care and Child Protective Services and homeschool? And sure enough, they had a category. And it was in policy, it wasn't in law. It was volume 15,000 in their law, in their policy. I read it and I thought, this is unbelievable. This is exactly what we need. The next day I went to Jason. Jason, get a hold of legislative council. We want you to cut and paste this section out of here. Give it to them. We want this to be part of the law. Well, as soon as he sent it to them, they said, we can't do that. They said, why? Because we just can't codify policy. Why not? Well, we just can't do that. So I said, okay, and Jason told me that, and I thought about it a little bit, and I thought, okay, well then this is what you can do. You can put in there where we got it. Volume 13, Child Protective Services Handbook, 2013. You know exactly where it's at. So now, you have to figure out how to get it on the floor and get it passed. Once we did this, I talked to everybody on the committee, the chairman loved it, we passed it unanimously. It went through the committee and was going to local and uncontested, which means it would go to the floor and it would be passed. Unfortunately, the individual who was presenting the bill the next day killed a bill on the part of the chairman of the committee that his bill was supposed to come out of. And probably rightly so. It wasn't supposedly not a good bill. I don't remember what it was at this point, but nonetheless, we could not get the bill out now. My chairman went to that chairman and said, would you please, this is for the children of Texas, will you please pass this bill? Please pass it on the floor. Please bring it to a vote. She said, absolutely not. It's done. I thought, no, man. I'm telling you, I said, Lord, please show me how to do this. I need help here. And I thought, I'm going to put this in the form of an amendment. Senate Bill 206 was a sunset bill. This is one of these kind of bills that applies to a lot of different areas. And I went to the parliamentarian who God had given me tremendous favor with, Chris. I said, Chris, help me find this. Where can this go? Long story short, we looked through and he said, well, here are a number of opportunities for you. And I looked at one lady who sits next to me on my committee in Human Services, sits in front of me, Susan King Taylor. I said to Susan, Susan, I got to get this amendment on your amendment that you're going to be putting on. So now the amendment is going to be an amendment to the amendment on a bill. The way this works is before you can pass the bill, you got to pass the amendment. If there's an amendment to the amendment, you got to pass the amendment to the amendment. Are you guys following me on this? I mean, this is like they create this stuff so you can't pass bills. You ought to be thankful for that. Sure enough, I went to her. The lady told me who had the bill. She said, I agree with the Senate. We're not putting anything on this bill. You can go ahead and try and see if you can get it voted on, because then they have to put it up to the House. Well, I went to Susan King, and I had to plead and beg, and finally she said, okay, I'll do this. So I went. Representative Keough amendment. I did just a short read on it. Clerk came up. I went up. I moved passage. All in favor, aye. All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Boom. My amendment is on the amendment. Then she came up with her amendment, did the same thing. Then Sidney Burkett, I don't know what she was thinking, but I think that God just gave us favor with her. Her bill went and it passed, went over to the Senate, passed, was signed into law. As of right now today, if a person wants to homeschool a foster child, they can invite them into their home. Doesn't make a difference whether they're 5 days, 10 days, whether they want to adopt them, they can homeschool those kids. And it's an amazing conservative victory, people. I hope you can grasp what that means. Now, there are some that are going to say, well, we don't want any involvement with the state. Well, okay, then you don't have to do that. But there are plenty of homeschool families that would love to have one of these kids come into their home and educate them in the nurturing of the things of the Lord, teaching them the basics in education, through whether they use a Beckett curriculum, Bob Jones University, whatever. They use these various curriculums, and they do an awesome job. And so there are some that will take advantage of this. When some of those kids come out, their lives will be changed forever because of that. And then we did there's a number of other things, and I wanted to share that in the next, we've got some things coming up in the next session. But I want you to know, when I went to the House, I authored a number of things for legislation. And what I found as soon as I got there, first of all, I voted against the Speaker of the House. So I was now part of the gang of 19. So I walked in as a freshman and with a giant question mark stamped right to my forehead. He's a freshman, he doesn't have a clue, who is this guy? And then, of course, being a pastor at the same time, everybody's kind of going, this guy's obviously going to be all about social issues and whatever. And then when I voted for the Speaker, then the question mark just got that much bigger. And so I thought, how am I going to get anything done here? Or am I just going to vote and go down with the ship all the time? Can I get actually anything done? And so I thought, what I need to do is I need to make alliances, I need to find friends of like values. This party, Libertarian, Democrat, whatever, who have the same values that I have, who are here and want to participate and make some things happen, and who have experience and are well respected. And you know what I did? I took my bill that we wrote and gave it to them. I got to be joint author on a number of these, and they were able to get things done that as a freshman I could have never gotten done. It was pretty remarkable. We got a bill done, a Health and Human Services background check bill that was mine. Do you know that in Health and Human Services there are 6,000 people that have access, or more, that have access to personal information of people? Driver's license, they have access to Social Security numbers, insurance policies, assets, whatever, and the extended families, and they have never done background checks on anybody that they have hired. Yet all the other agencies, many of the other ones, agencies do it. And sure enough, we were able to get a bill passed. Guess what's in place now in Health and Human Services? And for DADS, Department of Aging and Disability, which is background checks. I was at this 2920 because it was moving too slow and I was afraid it wouldn't get through. It became SB 1540. Gave the bill over, went over and talked to the senator. We presented it in both places. Although my bill had been done and finished, his was actually going to come over to the floor. I picked up as a co-sponsor of that, and it got done under SB 1540. I worked on the county transparency bill, got left pending in committee. What that bill does is that makes a county of 45,000 or 45,000 people or more put their check registry online. And I heard, we can't do that, it's too expensive. I thought, okay, I'm going to pick the most liberal county with almost 1 million people, and let's see what they do. And so I looked up Travis County. Travis County has online their check registry. Go to it, look it up. It takes a little while to find it, but you'll get it. They have online a check registry with checks as little as 56 cents. I called the comptroller, and with $250,000 IRS and some other things, and I called the controller over there, and I told her who I was. We set up an appointment. It took me about a week to get an appointment with her. We set up an appointment to talk over the phone. I said, how do you feel about transparency? She says, I love transparency. I said, really? Tell me about how you do this. She said, well, it's just an Excel spreadsheet, talking about all the money it's going to cost. It didn't cost them anything. They had people there to do it. They put it online. It's posted every day. They've advanced it. There's some people who have done this now. They've spent up to $1 million on web stuff and charts and graphs and all kinds of stuff from some high-dollar agency that comes in and does it. But do you know, I said, you know, that 56 cent or 64 cent or whatever it was check, you know, we all know, and we kind of joke, that costs us more to produce that check and print that check than it does for what the check's worth. She says, but we have a paper trail for everything. And we know who wrote the check, who it was made out to, and for how much. Wouldn't we like to have that in our community? Well, I have to tell you, county transparency, there were some that were in favor of it. They had a little bit of tough time in committee, and there are a number of people that are already doing this. We even put a caveat, an amendment in it, that if you already have a process in place, from this day forward, you're exempt from our deal. But it didn't make it through committee. That's why we'll go next time, keep knocking away on it until we get it. There's another one, named driver insurance bill, authored legislation on online solicitation of a minor, franchise tax repeal, offered legislation on the in-state tuition bill I told you about, offered one, House Bill 805, eliminating gun-free zones. I talked to Alice Tripp at Texas Rifle Association. I talked to my friends over at the NRA. They said, please do not pursue this. We're working on campus carry and we're working on open carry. This is just going to convolute it. We'll work on it next session. Okay, so I let it go. Overall, as we look on our record for what has taken place, this was the greatest privilege of my life. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. We were able to joint author 29 bills, of which 14 passed. 3 passed the House, but were left pending in Senate committees on top of that, and one of those 14 bills got vetoed. Maybe some of you saw the newspaper. It was my victim offender mediation bill. I told you about it before it went, but it got vetoed. So 13 of those joint authored bills became law. My co-authored bills, of 70 bills, 26 passed both chambers, 26 passed into law. I was able to co-sponsor, which is like a co-author, 7 Senate bills, 5 passed both chambers, 5 passed into law. So that 44 bills with your representative's name on it have passed into law here in the state of Texas. And I believe most of these bills are good, strong, conservative legislation. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I will tell you, again, this was truly the greatest honor of my life. As I have opportunity, should you all be so gracious to give me an opportunity again? Eliminate gun-free zone bills, repeal and state tuition bill, we must pursue that. Property tax appraisal reforms, county government transparency bill, and some other things that we'll be working on. And we did some bills, some mud bills. You know, there's mixed emotions on the texting issue, texting when driving. But I want to tell you about this. Because texting and driving, we know people could get in trouble while they're texting and driving. I just want to encourage you that there's a category of laws that the Department of Public Safety says are laws that have to do with things that are distraction. They're distraction-based wrecks. In the last 2 years, of the 28,000 wrecks, roughly 32 to 3,500 were distraction-based wrecks. Those distraction-based wrecks include things like texting, talking on the telephone, eating and driving, putting makeup on in the car while you're driving, daydreaming. I'm driving over the bridge, I'm driving up Congress, I know that I'm going to stand and I'm going to be arguing on the floor with the dean, the oldest standing member of the House of Representatives. And that day I'm going to be in an argument with him on the floor. I knew it. So I'm thinking about this. And then I started thinking about it for a second. I thought distraction-based accidents, and I turned around and I looked and I thought, you know, there maybe is something to that daydreaming. I don't even remember driving over the bridge to where I'm sitting in the middle of traffic, now almost to the House of Representatives. That's how we get wrecked. Only 12% are attributed to texting. So when we think about these things, we think about relationship to our fundamental issues having to do with our freedoms and whatnot. I don't think we should be texting in the car. I don't think we should be eating in the car. I don't think we should be driving without our seatbelts. I think that we need to do what is safe. But more importantly, do what is safe for other people. Isn't that the Christian thing to do? Do unto others. So if we're doing all these other things, how are we keeping other people safe? That's what needs to happen. But we start implementing laws for every little thing. People, we have so many laws, we don't even know what they are. And as we lose our moral undergirding and the moral fiber of our country, we no longer are governing ourselves, thinking that if we just implement another law. And in this gentleman's argument, he said 95% of the people who have a law on driving will follow the law. And I challenged that at the very end of my challenge. I said, you said 95%, right? 95% was the number. I said 95%. You can go to the archives and look at it. I said, do you know that we have a law in place right now that if you're under 17 years old, you can't text and drive and you got to wear a seatbelt? That's in place right now. And you have named this law after that person with the commitment that 95% of the people will follow these laws. Do you know that that girl that you've named this after died because she was texting and was without a seatbelt? Putting laws in place don't make us do things. We have to have a heart that wants to do things, that desire to do things. And if we have an attitude, but if we have a libertarian attitude that laws are bad, that's wrong too. Because God implemented laws and He implemented government for a purpose. But as it related to that, I presented it. I got beat up on the floor. He's an old standing member. He's been proud of me. I was respectful to him. And it ended up not making it through the Senate. Last time was vetoed by Governor Perry. So that's it. We're done. Questions or comments, please?
Here.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I want to just thank you tremendously for all the good work you've done. We need good Christian men up there. But there is one issue that I do
Yes.
not agree with you.
Sure.
As prep assistant, I have 3 kids, 8 grandkids. And I was very disappointed with HB4. And why is because my research showed there's no long-term benefits to this pre-K. We've had Head Start since '65.
Right. And
even the Department of Health says those students are not superior to the, they do not remain superior to everything. The other thing I would bring up, you made the comment you did not vote for, more taxes. Well, we're going to spend at least $7,000 for each student, correct, in this pre-K. So, that's a tax. Now, it may not be any new taxes, as Abbott's office told me, but still, I'm paying for it.
Sure.
Okay. So the main thing is, there's no long-term benefits. The children are tired of school by 3rd grade when you're starting them early. And to me, this is a precursor to all-day pre-K and then 3-year-olds. I know it was the top priority of Abbott, but I put border security ahead of the pre-K. I'm from Hidalgo County.
Right.
I have family there.
Right.
So I have a hard time understanding,
Okay, can I address those,
Yeah.
some of those things? I'm in fundamental agreement with what you're saying. I will say, as an educator, and I have a degree in school administration. When I got my Master of Divinity, I was a double major, got school administration and certified by the Association of Christian Schools International. We had a half-day kindergarten age 4 program and a half-day kindergarten age 5. And in a structured environment, I will tell you from my own experience, in being a headmaster of a school, that by the end of the year, we could have a child stand up, kindergarten age 4, read short vowel sentences from the book in front of a group of people that they had never seen. They had never seen the book before. Now, I will tell you, they were extra sharp kids. We always picked out the sharpest. But I'm just telling you. But that being said, what I did was I said, okay, we're spending this money. Who am I? I can stand up all day long and I can vote against this deal. Who am I to try and not pass this bill so we can continue to have zero accountability with the money that's going to be spent either way. This money's being spent right now. If we would have voted it down, then the money would be spent anyway. And with that, there'd be zero accountability to that. So the way I looked at it was, either way it's going to be spent. So I'm going to vote in favor of some conservative principles. And I think we would all agree that it is a conservative principle and we're spending money to keep track of the money, to keep accountability of the money, to make sure that those who are spending it or are the recipients of the benefit of it are involved in the process, parental involvement. You know, these are some of the things that I thought about. Because here's the problem with the whole thing. Many people, first of all, there already is full-day pre-K kindergarten if you want it. So it's not expanding to that. That already is available. Another issue was that this is, like you said, has been going on for over 30 years, so it's not something new. So the way I look at it is, what you have, we have illegal immigration. It's been going on for a long time. It's a joke to think there are only 11 million illegals in this country. I've been hearing 11 million for the last 20 years. Try 40 to 50 to 60 million. So you got these kids that are reading deficient, you have kids that are intellectually challenged, and you have kids that are economically challenged, and it goes to those groups. In my district, in the schools where I live, it doesn't even apply to them, and I don't like paying the tax either. But you know what? It's going to be spent either way, so why don't we put some teeth into it and then have at least a sunset clause? I heard it, I saw it, I was there, and I said, I'm going to be here in 10 years, Lord willing, and I'm going to find out what happened if this really works. Because right now, we have no way of judging it. So what came out in this No Child Left Behind nonsense that has been going on for all of these years, one right after the other, good intentions, bad results. It even forces them an amendment in it to keep Common Core out. What's to keep Common Core out now? So the way I looked at it was, I don't like it, but I'm going to vote in favor of something that at least has some teeth, because what we have now has no teeth whatsoever. But I empathize with your feelings, and I'm in fundamental agreement with you. So I did it because it was going to happen.
No, of course.
Thank you for the question. Yeah. Yes.
To carry on with that, we do have results. We have results that our kids are coming out of high school uneducated, can't hold a job, can't read, can't write.
Sure.
And some of them have started off in the pre-K and
Sure.
K-4 program.
Right.
The best thing to have done was to stop the funding. You don't like what's going on, stop the funding.
Right.
You just increase the budget again for education.
Bob, I agree with you.
We're throwing good money at something that's
Sure.
bad. Our public education system needs to be shut down. CPS needs to be shut down. Reorganize and start something out that works, because this stuff is draining our pockets and doing this economy and this state absolutely no good.
Okay. Can I ask you this question? Would you rather me just let them keep on spending the money and not try to put some accountability to it?
No, stop
because
spending the money.
Bob, I am one man who was a freshman my first year in the House of Representatives.
I know, and you
and they're going, who is this guy with two giant question marks?
Okay.
And I'm going, I've got to do with what I have. Now, my suggestion is, let's present a bill in the future for
Let's just
something
go
like
ahead and
that.
pass it, we'll fix it later.
Well, yeah, but-
It's not gonna work. You had the gumption to stand up against Strauss. I'm expecting you to have the same gumption to say, I'm not spending any more money. This is broken. We're not gonna fix it with continuing to throw money at it.
Here's the, this is what I'm saying. Here are the conditions that exist today. 30 years of no accountability. Okay? Why? Total confusion. Laws over laws over laws. A welfare system that is absolutely out of control. Illegal immigration that's been going on. Even Ronald Reagan, our hero, gave amnesty to 3 million illegals. You have all these issues that are what are feeding this one issue. And we want to vote against this issue because of all these things that have taken place. We hate all this over here. We hate the fact it's been going on for 30 years. We hate the fact that we have all this illegal immigration. But I got to vote in 2 hours.
Vote no.
I can't vote, so I vote no. And then what do we have? I voted no. And I go down with the ship. when I can vote for something that I personally believe has the greatest accountability. You can't convince me any other way. If that makes me somebody who doesn't follow conservative values, then tell me, what is accountability, assessment, cooperation? Those are conservative principles.
Okay, who's gonna?
That's why I did
who's
it, but we
following
could
through
go
with
on and
this?
on.
I know, but you made the comments, this is the stuff, but how are
Yeah.
we gonna enforce it? Exactly. How are you gonna enforce it now that you got the law? Who's gonna be there to make sure the school districts are doing what they're supposed to be doing?
Well, you know what?
Nobody.
That's, my homeschool bill, how do I enforce that? That's the nature of laws. They come out of the legislature. We are not responsible to enforce them. They are supposed to be done in magistrates, local magistrates, in the local law systems that we have in place in every county and every township or every city or wherever the case may be. But the other side of that is, I am not in disagreement with you. I want it all to go away. I don't want to spend the money. I don't want to spend the money. But please, everybody hear me on this. I don't want to spend the money on this. I don't think it's a good investment, and I see the problems with it.
How can we get rid of pre-K in the future?
We need a revival in this country. How can we get rid of abortion? How can we get rid of the recent lesbian gay stuff? How can we get rid of all this? Passing a law is not going to do it. But what we can do, and what I did truthfully from my heart, was I went there with a desire to manage what was going on. That's all I could do. Yeah.
Yeah, as we learned 2 days ago, 4th of July is to celebrate the Vietnam War, as I guess a lot of our kids are being taught.
Yeah.
On the illegal immigrants, they're not illegal immigrants, they're foreign nationals. I sponsored a guy who was translator for my unit when I was in Vietnam. He escaped. I got a lot of his torture damage repaired. And I'm enrolled in school on an F1 visa.
Yeah.
All right? I paid 4 times what an illegal pays. Now, they're not illegals. They're foreign nationals here illegally. They're not immigrants. They're not aliens. They're foreign nationals. Why do we discriminate against foreign nationals who are here legally by forcing them to pay 4 times what someone who's broken the law pays? But I think Bob was after the fact. I am tired of hearing every school district talk about how good they are when they're in the worst in the world. I lived overseas 16, 17 years. In the 60s, we were the best in the world. Now we're laughed at. It's so bad that in Germany, if you apply for a job with BioAG and you're a U.S. citizen, graduate U.S. high school, graduate U.S. university, you have to take a test.
Sure.
It's the only people in the world who have to prove they got an education even at the collegiate level. But we need to attack our school system. As long as we have our public school system as it is, our kids are getting less and less educated every year.
I agree. And here's what I did. I stood against every possible liberal, what I believe to be liberal educational standard. I stood against House Bill 317. I was the only one in the entire House of Representatives that stood against that bill. The only one. The only one.
But we need
There was
to
no one else
change
that
the
got mine.
system. We need something big.
I know this. It's going to take a revival. It's going to take a change in the hearts of people. Please hear me. I feel your frustration. Listen, the reason I ran for office, I got tired of throwing my shoe at the TV. And every time I hear somebody up there right now in Congress who's yelling and he's arguing, he's fighting, I go, yeah, man, he's standing up for the little guy. He's standing up for me. I don't see him getting anything done. But he makes us all feel better and nothing gets done. And they turn right around and they roll over on this amnesty thing. They roll over on the stuff that our president wants. I mean, it's amazing. And in the last week, there were 3 elements that the Supreme Court, which apparently now are the supreme beings of the country, that they can even change the definition of marriage. When you and I voted some years ago, and it's in our Constitution, that the definition of marriage is between a man and a woman, a male and a female. And when this came up with our dear friend and our former gold medal athlete who decided that he wanted to become a woman and ended up on the front of Vanity Fair, I thought I could take this no more. I taught 3 weeks in my church on a biblical perspective of gender identity. And then we turn right around in the next week, and here we sit, and in our system, nobody is saying a thing.
You don't go to the church we do.
It is mind-boggling.
Our pastor spoke up.
Where's our Attorney General? Where's our governor? That remains to be seen, we're talking about it right now.
Aren't they
But
doing
there
their
won't-
10th Amendment thing on that?
Yeah, well, we're not, no, let me answer my question in relationship to this. We certainly can. If you want to talk about nullification, secession, we can talk about all that. You got it.
Yes. What is your take on when the House representatives, basically, including Representative Cook, ruined the Senate Bill 19, the ethics reform bill? What is your take on that?
What was it, so, tell me what was.
Senate Bill 19, the ethics reform? You know how they messed it up?
Oh, here's what happened with that bill.
Right.
First of all, they start out with House Bill 37, of which at the beginning of it, it made sense. I co-authored the bill. Then all of a sudden, everything started changing on it, but I was already co-authored. Never made it to the floor, was never voted on. It came back over from, in the form of Senate Bill 19, which came back over to the House of Representatives. As soon as it did, they started throwing every amendment on it that you can imagine. I mean, it was amazing. I mean, some absurd stuff. And it was like we spent hours on this bill. And I'm thinking, how in the world would we even want to have something like this? I don't even know what's in it. And, you know, if all else fails, vote no, right? If you don't, and you don't understand it, didn't understand it, and sure enough, that bill was so convoluted and was so bad. We ended it right there, and I voted against it, as did a bunch of others. Yeah, the ethics bill. And that was a priority the governor did. They came against, they said, well, Mark, why would you co-author this bill at the beginning? I said, because it doesn't affect 501c3s. I said, as a pastor of a church and a nonprofit organization, I've got more to lose than anybody in the House of Representatives. This one doesn't do that, but it's the unintended consequences. Okay, I just felt like, hey, we ought to have people be able to show who gives and who doesn't give. Well, then it began to add all this other stuff to it as well, and it became out of control. Thank God it never made it to the floor. So when they got put on something that was that bad. But House Bill 19, it was a disaster. Yeah.
But didn't it get past the House and then died again in the Senate?
Yeah, I'm not sure how the whole process went by the time it was all over, but all I know is I voted against it. And I got a tip of a hat from some people that really went after me on my House Bill 37, which wasn't fair. But that's okay, I got big shoulders. I co-authored it, and that's just what happens. That's one thing I've also learned, to be careful what you back, because it changes along the way.
Mark, it was about this time last year that I just started getting myself a little bit involved with things going in Austin here, overpass protesting, but more in particular in January, going up to the beginning of the 84th.
Yeah.
And then seeing you sworn in.
Got a picture of you behind my desk.
Yeah.
You look good.
I still got it. I got the video. I had a couple of very strong burns this year, and one of them was the American Law and American Court, HB 562. There was, well, on this one picture, I got the picture, the date that it was taken. It was there was 41 co-authors. I think it was two authors, something like that. By all said, it was done towards the end. It was approximately 50. With a half a dozen trips back and forth to Austin, you know, talking to representatives, trying to do what we can to help get this moved on. The bill that you co-authored, in my opinion, was held up so long to by the time they did say, yeah, we passed it out of committee, and then it got the calendars. I called the calendars and I says, well, it came here too late. There's no time to move. Okay, fine. Your bill is identical to the Senate bill, SB 531. 531 overwhelmingly moved through the Senate, came back out to the House, moved a couple of different committees, then it gets back into the calendars. There was a couple of different individuals that already had their votes, had already agreed on it. One, Representative Riddle. You know, there's so many different times that the person can vote on the same thing and change their mind, and one person out of, dozens or hundreds that already say yes, and a single person, after they've already voted